Beşparmak Mountains are a ridge of many spurs located in the Muğla and Aydın provinces of Turkey, running in an east-west direction along the north shore of the former Latmian Gulf on the coast of Caria, which became part of Hellenised Ionia. The city of Latmus, located on the south slopes of Mount Latmus 25 kilometers east of Miletus, was originally a port on the narrow gulf, as reported by Strabo. He also states that Latmus is the same as Mount Phthires in the Catalogue of Trojans. The mouth of the Gulf of Latmus began to fill with sediment from the Maeander River, which emptied into it. Even in classical antiquity, by 300 CE Lake Baffa had formed behind the estuary marshes. It gradually diminished in salinity and would now be fresh water, except that canals to the Aegean introduce a saline element. The ecology remains a brackish water one, and the lake has been made a bird sanctuary. Its area of 7 square kilometers with a maximum depth of 25 meters still extends from the base of the west spur of Mount Latmus, although, having lost its port, the ancient medium-sized town of Caria has declined in size and facilities to the small village of Caria. Beşparmak looms far beyond Caria to the east for a total distance of about 35 kilometers, 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers wide. It is deeply eroded by various streams into spurs. The spur that can be seen from Caria is one dag, or mountain, but the entire ridge with all the spurs is Dagla Mountains. In the sense of range, the ancient writers generally recognized the western spur over the Gulf as Latmus, but Strabo reports that the ridge east was called Mount Griam and extended through Caria. Geology. The morphotectonic configuration of Anatolia and the Aegean is a result of continental drift movements associated with the alpine orogeny, a zone of mountain building caused by the collision of the African and Arabian plates with the Eurasian plate. The former have been slipping under the latter, compressing and lifting the edge and creating zones of metamorphic rock from previous layers of sedimentary rock. These zones in the Aegean are represented by a number of massifs that were originally buried by crustal subduction: the Rhodope, Kazakh Mandas, Cycladic Massif and Crete. For various geologic reasons, modeled differently by different geologists, the zone of compression in the Aegean became one of extension. The region widened and dome-like or ovoid massifs were uncovered, or exhumed, from the subduction zones and rose by isostasy. In the case of the Mendes Massif, which is 40,000 square kilometers, the reasons are better known due to geologic research in central Turkey. Anatolia is a triangular block created by the intersection in central Turkey of the North and East Anatolian faults. As the northward-pressing Arabian plate pushes against this wedge, the latter slips to the west, but the broad end opens along fault lines like the rays of a fan, extending the massif to the north, northeast and south. This is being called a divergent model. The entire massif is divided anearly by karst topography into 3 sections: the Gordes Massif north of the Alashiera Geddes Graben, the Sinai Massif south of the Büyükmendes Graben, and the Central Massif between. The latter is split like a forked tongue by the Küçükmendes Graben into the Kozli detachment to the north and the Gunny detachment to the south. Michael is part of the Gunny detachment, while Latmus is in the Sinai Massif. The Graben are low-key rift valleys. There have been some small intrusions of magma into the Graben, appearing now as granito-diorite outcrops. Dates on thin sections of monazite obtained from the earliest exhumed rocks of the Graben suggest that the Cenozoic extension in the Gordes Massif, and possibly the entire Mendes Massif, might have begun in the late Oligocene. Despite the rare intrusions, the massif is not of volcanic origin. Most of the visible layer is light, metamorphic rock of various kinds, especially marble and schists. Except for alluvial fans of impermeable clay, the rock is highly porous due to a network of small faults, which dips into the warmer regions below the surface. Warm springs and vapors are common, giving the appearance of volcanic activity. The ancients cross-culturally viewed these phenomena as being caused by divinities, which rock paintings indicate they worshipped. The north slopes of Latmuses are subject to heavy and damaging mudslides, which also would have contributed to the idea that it was a god. Mythology. Latmus appears in Greek mythology as the site of the cave where Selene's consort Endymion lies forever young and beautiful in blissful sleep. Prehistory. Beginning in 1994, about 170 rock paintings have been discovered in shallow caves and overhangs near springs at the foot of Mount Latmus overlooking Lake Baffa. They came to light in a survey conducted by Annelies Pasklo of the German Archaeology Institute. Pasklo dates the earliest to about 6000 BCE and believes from other findings that the region has been continuously occupied since then. She is currently working to get Mount Latmus reserved as a national park. The paintings, which are done entirely in red, depict mainly social and religious scenes. Different representations of the mountain include a dragon, indicating that it was worshipped as a god. That is, Latmus was a sacred mountain at least as early as the early Bronze Age. A 2004 palynological study of two sediment cores taken from Lake Baffa near Caria and from the western depth suggests a habitation sequence of the Biocomendas River Valley and the shores of Latmus that appears to support the early history of the region. BAFS-1, containing the oldest sediment, is layered in 4 subsections, the first carbon dated to before 4000 BCE. For the pollen of subsection 1, a model can be constructed of a lightly grazed climax forest of deciduous oak and pine, 27.6% Quercus pubescens, 14.6% Pinus, and lesser concentrations of Isoetes hystrix. Low levels of the pasture weed, Plantago lanceolata, indicate a low level of grazing by animals belonging to indigenes that lived somewhere else. There is no evidence that they settled or grew crops in the region. Subsection 2, dated 1240-1126 BCE to 710-558 BCE, represents a settlement from the Beşparmak occupation phase of southern Anatolia, dated the 3500 and 3000 BP to 1500 BP. It has a specific palynological profile of secondary anthropogenic indicators, that is, not pollen of cultivated plants but of other species growing on cultivated land. Certain percentages of Plantago lanceolata, Sanguisorba minor, Pistacia, Platanus, Quercus caloprinos and Juniperus. The Lake Baffa profile shows the replacement of deciduous oak and pine with macae species, Philera, Cistus, Ericaceae, fruit trees, Olea, Castagna, and farm weeds, Plantago lanceolata and Juniperus. Carbon in the sediment suggests the forest was cleared by slash and burn. This period corresponds to the settlement of the Carians in the area, who were apparently moved in from southern Anatolia. There is a semi-legendary tradition that they subdued another pre-Hellenic people, the Leleges, but the evidence is not precise enough to say if the indigenes were all or partly Leleges. As the Carians worshipped Endymion, he may have been brought in at this time. Subsection 3 reveals an abandonment of the cleared areas, the decline of Olea, and the spread of Pistacia, Pinus brutia and Quercus coccifera on formerly cleared land and in the macae. As this is the time of the rise of Ionia, the palynological scenario suggests a movement of population from the land to the newly settled or expanded big cities of the Ionian Lea. Subsection 4 and BAFS 6 go on to catalogue the return of the fruit trees, reclearing the land for pasture, planting of rye and other cereals, ultimate destabilization of the soil through overuse, denudation and acceleration of sedimentation. After the sealing off of the bay to form the lake, population and land use declined to the current low levels around Latmus, but the river valley is cultivated. History. Latmus became a member of the Delian League in the 5th century BCE. In the 4th century, the Persian satrap Mausolus of Halicarnassus captured the city by Aras and fortified it with a circuit wall. Under Hellenizing influence, the city was refounded a kilometre to the west on a rectilinear grid system as Heraclea under Latmus, dedicated to the hero Heracles. The modern village of Caria is built among the ruins. The Temenos, or sanctuary of Endymion, with pre-Greek origins, was rebuilt in Hellenistic times, and may still be seen on a rise to the south of the ancient city. The building faces the southwest. It has a cellar with a horseshoe-shaped rear wall partly cut out of the bedrock, with an entrance hall and columned forecourt. A temple of Athena at Heraclea reveals its earlier foundation by not being aligned with the Hellenistic street pattern. In Byzantine times, the mountain, known as Latmus, became a flourishing monastic center. According to tradition, the first monastic community was established by Sinite monks fleeing from the Muslim conquests in the 7th century. By the early 10th century, there were 3 monasteries, and by 1222, the monastic community of Latmus numbered 11 monasteries. It began declining, however, towards the century's end due to increasing Turkish attacks, and disappeared in the 14th century. Endymion was Christianized as a mystic saint, whose coffin was opened annually and whose bones emitted musical tones, and the site drew pilgrims. In the 9th century, Joseph the hymnographer was tonsured in the monastery of Latmus. Iron ore was mined in the area as of the early 20th century.